we are doing our second principle, Limbic Brains Harmonize, and we're on the third video, the positive part.
Correct.
Of how we can tell that a family is at least positively enacting these principles, whether it's intentional or not, that's another story, but they're actually positively doing that. I'm thinking from our history of the families we've worked with, it's not always the case that we see this happening.
Not always, but I mean, when we in situations where we don't see these happening, then this becomes the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And again, these are what we're going to talk about here today are the first steps, the things that we look for that tell us the parents are positively utilizing this principle. And the principle, of course, is that our limbic brains are going to harmonize. We're going to, as a family, we're going to experience the same emotion.
Yeah. So I think what we have talked about so many times with families is that the parents are the model for any kind of emotional regulation. The parents are the model. That's the go-to. And neither of us grew up with parents intentionally teaching us about emotions.
I think it's endemic in the entire society right now. I don't think, in general, anybody is teaching kids to be aware of their emotions and how to deal with them. Okay? Yeah. One of the things we look for in parents is that ability. Do you even have the vocabulary to describe your emotions? We've talked many times the natural tendency in when you bring traumatized children is your brain to start dealing with the scary things that go on, and then what happens is your vocabulary adapts. And you have a lot of words to describe things that make you mad and things that make you irritable, things that make you scared.
Frustrated.
Yeah. But you start to have there's very few words to describe happy, joyful,
Yeah.
And of course the one that gets overused is fine. It was fine.
It was fine. Yes. How many parents have said to us, "Oh, I don't want my kids to know that I'm sad or scared," as if the kids wouldn't be able to interpret that. So those are the kind of words that we're wanting our parents to use. Like, I feel scared. This just happened, or it may, or it could happen tomorrow, and how I'm going to deal with it. That's just the simple things that we're asking parents to do.
Well, here again, when you're not aware of how this principle works in your family, the family starts to harmonize with the scared and sad child, in which case the scared and sad increases in the family system, and a lot of times they don't even want to talk about it.
No.
So.
But that's the key to healing, and with this first point, it's so important for parents to have the vocabulary to start the emotional communication. I think it's so. We'll go back to happy, mad, sad, and scared. It's not like it's a big task. We're keeping it simple to talk about those four emotions. And then when they recognize that they're feeling that, they actually take time to accommodate it. They don't dismiss it and just get busy ignoring it, but they say, I'm feeling sad right now. I need to shift my brain, so let's go for a walk. That they're actually able to say, I have a means to manage this.
Well, number one we look for, of course, is to be able to verbalize it. So, when you start talking accommodating it, do we hear from parents saying things like, man, I just needed to talk to somebody, so I called up so-and-so. Or if they don't have somebody in their natural support system, I needed to talk to somebody, so I scheduled an appointment with a therapist. But so oftentimes when these systems are under stress, time isn't even allocated, much less strategies.
Right. I have one mom in my head right now who is like, my emotions aren't important. I have to keep dealing with my daughter. As if we can put those over here and deal with them, in 5 years from now. No, we'll be basket cases by 5 years. We keep putting them over here. But we really have to do this.
And you have to be able to see it, to model it. We look for parents who can say, oh, I had a really rough morning. but you know what? I can shift here and I can do some therapy work here in session.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to, you know, oh, the morning was awful. I can't. And basically, they'll use some paraphrase of, I can't get myself out of the scared and the sad right now.
Yeah. Because
So we look for that ability to be able to shift
the
between-
brain. Too many of the families, especially after we start work, or by the time we get to them, is they're just so steeped in the fear and sadness. There's nothing that they can do, and it's important for their brains to be able to shift, and that's a healthy brain. We're looking for flexibility.
Yep.
And
And of course, one of the other key signs to that flexibility is, do the parents have a large repertoire of activities that they can do to make themselves feel happy?
yeah, and we've said that over and over again with the families we've worked with, is write a list, and they struggle. They struggle with it, putting anything on the list, or they go into blame. Well, I used to do that, but I can't do that anymore because of a little Johnny or Susie here.
So what we're looking for is parents to say, oh my gosh, I take time outs with a cup of tea. I make sure I get my exercise in every day.
Right.
I have a lot of activities. I like to crochet. I like to kayak. I like to,
Even read a book.
yeah. All of these things that people can clearly say, I do these to make me feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Because of course, the skills that we have for ourselves become the skills that we have to teach our children, which becomes the next thing we kind of look at in a family system that recognizes that you're all going to be sharing the same emotions.
Right.
Is we look for that ability to teach. Are people intentionally teaching their children how to handle their emotions?
Yeah, and so that's to intentionally teach this, they have to put some importance on it, to prioritize this. And how many times do we say to families, your child's behavior's emotionally driven.
Mm-hmm.
You work with their emotions and you'll change the behaviors.
Yep.
And it's such a foreign piece, but that's where you're going. Is we start teaching our kids about emotions and how to deal with them and all.
Well, hands down, undoubtedly, our first skill is modeling.
Mm-hmm.
If we can model recognition and processing of emotions, that's our most powerful skill as parents. But then there's also that, how do we relay? How do we encourage the children? Everybody has that question. Well, how was school today?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what if instead of that question, we ask the question, was there anything in school today that was scary?
Mm-hmm.
Or anything in school today that particularly made you happy?
Well, sometimes, I'm thinking of the kids again, that all that's blocked. We have to say, when the kids come home and we're having our cookies and milk, it's like, let me tell you about my day. I had these happy times and then I had a scary time. And so that becomes a normal conversation.
Part of reconnection.
Yeah. And just to say, for me in particular, it would be, I traveled the whole Route 30 and there was this policeman behind me the whole time. You know how scary that is? So it's easy for me to talk about those kind of things. And it's not like, our family's in horrible financial condition and all that. We're just talking about the normal daily things.
Correct. There are some fears that are not appropriate to share with your children.
Right.
But there are other fears that are.
Mm-hmm.
And since we're the model, we need to have the skills to share that, our own emotional experience. And then we have to be able to encourage them to process their emotions with us.
Right. And we give them space.
Mm-hmm.
We, instead of, especially the more we push a child, the more pushback we'll get. But when we invite them to participate, then they're much more open, where it just feels more normal for them.
Do we provide them space for their own self-care?
That's too many parents would say, well, I tell them to go to their room when they're mad, sad, scared.
That's not the same thing. That's not the same thing. But do we label for them? It looks to me like you're feeling scary right now.
Mm-hmm.
I usually take a walk. You want to take a walk?
Yeah,
Get out in nature.
we know the kids have normal stresses. Whether schoolwork is always a one that we can help with. Yeah, I know you got a spelling test on Friday, and the words are really hard this week. So we'll spend a few minutes practicing, and then we're going to go out and play a little bit of baseball because it's hard.
And in our evaluation of our children's maturity, do we take the time to evaluate how they process scary events and experiences?
Because that would give us keys to what freedoms that they could handle.
Correct. If we don't prioritize it, then what ends up happening is the sharing of emotion is just willy-nilly and uncontrolled.
Right. So we have to teach through our model. We teach through our words, our narrating, our experiences, their experiences, so that they have these words going on in their heads. Not just the model, but the words that go with it.
And the experiences in their head too of, and in my family, we talk about feelings. Mm-hmm. This is what we do.
Yeah.
That's so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
The last one here we look for is, are parents okay with children experiencing sad and scary things? Do they have a plan for it?
That's really hard for parents.
Mm-hmm.
That is just, that's hard. But I think the next video will give us more clues on that one, because it's hard for any parent to see their child having those emotions.
Yeah. The classic one is, I don't want you hanging around that Jimmy. Mm-hmm. He's a bad influence. That's trying to cut off that experience. Do we have the strength to say, I'm really worried about you hanging around Jimmy. Keep an eye on it, because I think he's going to lead you into some pretty scary circumstances.
No, he won't, Mom. No, he won't. I won't let that happen.
And my personal favorite. Well, then we'll see how that works for you.
Yes, that is always true. Everybody listening to Jeff, it's like, you hear that? That's a red flag. So, and our last way that we teach is through our own experiences. Do we go out and take on some challenges? For me, putting me on a zip line is that's not going to happen. But roller coasters, I will take on the challenge of going on a roller coaster just to show to my kids, okay, I can face some fears and manage them. Their heights are particularly hard for me, but I have to work my way up through that.
Well, with our awareness of our own feelings of sad and scared, and this principle, then it becomes a matter too of looking at, well, how's that going to impact the family? Mm-hmm. For you, for instance, if you don't like roller coasters and you take the family to Hershey Park, well, how are you going to be with the family for the rest of the day after you try to get on the roller coaster?
Yeah, and even for me to watch the kids on the roller coaster is difficult. Mm-hmm. So I have to be very intentional in those experiences.
But you can't eliminate them all.
No, I can't. But I have to work on my emotional regulation skills while I'm watching, my kid go 100 miles an hour backwards.
I've heard families say already before, well, 3 years ago we went to the amusement park and it was just an awful experience. Mm-hmm. So we're not going back.
Yes.
And, that decision completely removes from the family environment the opportunity to prove growth and success.
Just as a sideline, that takes me back to the research on dopamine and serotonin and what those rides do to our systems. We need to have some education around that, because the next day after a trip to Hershey Park, you may need to have a down day because it will have stirred up all kinds of fears and the cortisol, adrenaline, and dopamine.
Exactly. But our point here is, you don't eliminate experiences for the family or for yourself even, based on the fact that it was scary earlier, too scary. We didn't have a good time with it, so we're never going to do it again. You allow for growth and opportunity and recognition that, you're always going to be running across things that you can't quite handle right now, but that maybe someday you will be able to.
And back to just the idea where this video is coming from, is if families are able to enact this principle positively, the parents are going to have emotional regulation skills. They're going to talk about emotions. It's not going to be a scary thing to them to do it. Their brains are flexible. They're going to shift back and forth. They're going to take time to recover or deal with the emotions that are stirred up. And then they're going to be intentionally teaching their kids. They're going to know it through their modeling. They're going to know it by the words that they're using, the narrating of everything and the family around emotions. And then the parents aren't going to be afraid of challenges either. They're going to say, of course I can do that.
Less afraid of challenges.
All right.
The next video
Yes.
that we'll be doing, we'll go into a little bit more detail about one of the most important and difficult aspects of this, and that is that co-regulation, that ability to sit with and be with our children in the fear, without making changes.